Welcome to Journeys and Journals. This is a piccolo. We're going to talk history, but most of all, we're going to talk music. And my guest today is the Music Man. Welcome, Dick.
Thank you for having me.
And your last name is?
Strycker.
Welcome. And you've brought a lovely lady with you.
I did. Her name is Anita.
But today you're dressed up, and so let's just forget who you are now and tell me who you were when.
When that picture was taken, I was the director of that band. And my name is Professor Charles J. Kurth. I was born in Prussia, not in Prussia. My parents were born in Prussia. They came to Wisconsin to homestead there. And when I was growing up, I didn't want to be a farmer because that just looked like a lot of work. I thought I would be a musician. Now the problem with being a musician is it doesn't pay very well. So you usually have to have a day job, which is eventually what I had to do. I did go to the University of Minnesota where I studied music. I became a very, very fine trumpet player. I wrote music for a band. Well, that's a bugle over there.
Well, that's close enough, isn't
That's
it?
A bugle doesn't have valves, but yeah, it's a trumpet of sorts. And yeah, and I also learned to compose. I had music written for a band that became published. So in 1890, there had already been a band in Grants Pass, and the first mayor of Grants Pass, his name was F.W. Van Dyke, and he was a clarinet player. He was a doctor, and he and I eventually played solos on the 5th annual graduation of Grants Pass High School in 1893.
Now, where did you, I mean, obviously you're very old.
I look well, don't I, for this age?
Well
yes.
preserved.
And you've learned this about Dr. Van Dyke,
yes.
and about the band. How
Yeah.
come you know so much?
I lived it. I was born in 1864. It was during the Civil War, if you remember that. Were you there? Then?
Of course.
1864. There was a band director here, and there was a band. Most towns had bands in those days. And they were without a director, and they needed a good one. So I was contacted. I had very good credentials, and I came here, 1890.
You need to mention that we got married while you were going to school up there in the music school of Minnesota.
Yeah.
And we had 2 children.
Before we came here. Yeah.
We brought 2 children, Zella and Carl.
And your name?
My original name was Armida Engeldow, but that was such a mouthful that someone decided to call me Mitzi.
Armillo.
Long
So
name.
you came from Germany?
I came from Iowa, Black Hawk, Iowa, and joined my husband up there in Minnesota while he finished school.
And how did you survive on a band concert, band salary? I mean,
Well, he worked.
Yeah, I think there wasn't a salary. There may have been, but it didn't amount to very much. Actually, I got a job at the store right there in the corner is the store where I was a clerk.
Oh,
Sugar Pine Door, it was called, and a building that burnt in early 1900s. But I was a clerk in there, and that's where I made my living. But I was well known in the town for directing the band and an orchestra. We had an orchestra as well. So.
Oh my! Now these are some of your instruments.
They are.
Personal instruments.
So you haven't kind of outgrown your persona here as the Music Man. It's a love of yours.
It is. I've been playing music since, well, my mother said, you will play the piano.
Mothers have a way about.
And I've thanked my mother ever since, although I never did when I was playing the piano. But I have come to appreciate that a lot. Me and the piano didn't get along well after about 4 years. And so my teacher was very good, and she steered me onto the flute. And I played that through high school. Let me show you a little of flute here.
Wow, that is music to my ears.
Isn't that pretty?
That song was
Yeah, that's
fun.
an interesting song. I'm a world traveler. We travel all the time. And I take my flute with me when I travel, and almost everywhere I played, that's an American song, but almost everywhere I played, Japan or Russia, they know that song. It has gone around the world.
I knew it when I was a little girl. Then for a long time I didn't hear it. And all of a sudden we were at dinner one day, and this soloist is just better than I could even imagine. I'm right back in my early childhood again.
Those things take you back.
Now, you've told us about how you were in your persona, this uniform as the, I don't see
Band
your,
director.
I don't see your stick.
Didn't bring the baton.
Baton.
I
I'm
didn't have
sorry,
a baton.
I called it a stick. But while you were doing that, what was your wife doing?
In real life,
No,
as Mitzi,
his wife.
well, we had two children in the pioneer days when the women had to do all the laundry by hand and that sort of thing. We were busy, so I didn't participate as Mitzi.
We did belong to the Methodist Church here, by the way, and you can go into the archives and see our name written in there as members.
And that is the oldest church, the one that when you drive down 99, it's just right there for you to,
Very
and
pretty.
you're like,
Yep.
this must be the center of town. You know, every town used to have a church with a steeple.
And there were about a half a dozen of them shortly after that, Presbyterians and so on. And their churches looked a lot like this one, but they're all gone.
Yeah, the Presbyterian one, wasn't it, that went up in smoke?
Yeah.
They're the Methodist. But Mitzi, this growing up, your kids growing up out here, while your husband, you had a job, but at nights you were off playing music, right?
That's true.
Well, the band did all different kinds of things.
We did have an orchestra as well. It was a chance for the ladies in town who were musicians to play, but they played girl things like the flute or the piano or the violin. And as I tell the story, there was a time when I thought, you know, I think we should have a women's brass band. We should start a women's brass band. Now you think about that, that was way ahead of the time. And so I called the ladies in that played flute and so on, and we talked about it, and it didn't happen.
Oh.
It didn't happen, and I thought, you know, why did this happen? What do you think?
Well, there were probably different ideas about that. Like the women had clothes that were so constricting, so
Can
they had
you
this pretty
imagine
little
trying to
waistline.
breathe with all of this constricted?
You play a trumpet
yeah,
with the
very difficult.
corset on.
Or maybe some of the husbands didn't really want their wives in the band. It was an all-male band.
It was
You
called the Grants Pass Cornet Band. It was all men.
Now the difference between a cornet and a trumpet is what?
It's the same length. It looks shorter because it's a little fatter, and it's conical bore rather than straight bore. And the difference is there's a little different sound. If you're a connoisseur, you would know immediately the different sounds.
And bugle?
Bugle is without valves. This one, let me show you a little bit. This one I got in Moscow.
Oh.
Walking through the square in Moscow, picture of Lenin on the front of it. Lenin was still kind of popular in '92, not so now.
I think they turned the volume down. That was a.
I hope that didn't blow a fuse.
And you notice it has the plastic mouthpiece, because if they blow it in the street in the winter, a metal mouthpiece is murder to your mouth.
Oh, it would freeze,
Right.
wouldn't it?
And the plastic is
And the plastic won't.
right.
You've got this other instrument. Is that as old as it looks?
Well, it is, but let me show you the family. This is the flute, the one I played a minute ago. This is a piccolo. I played this in the army band in Germany in the mid-50s. Something like.
Oh,
Gets to your
Calls
ears.
dogs. Well,
That's-
dogs hear that sound. Yeah.
I can understand. Tiny little thing. So then here's 3 sizes.
Yeah, this one is a bass flute. We have a bass choir, so we need
Flute
all
choir.
the family of flutes. And where this one plays middle sounds, that one, as you heard, plays high sounds. This one low. It's an octave
Now,
lower.
are they all vintage?
No, no.
I mean, the idea of having a flute is as old as.
Oh, they go way back. Some of the Indian flutes, or you go to Israel or back in that country, Old Testament times, they played flutes. So a flute
There's
is
one
very
like
old.
with the hole for the fingers.
That a pretty sound?
Oh, it's a gorgeous
Mellow.
sound.
Pretty
Well,
sound.
music man, what have you here?
Well, I started to show you the bugle, which comes from Russia. Nita and I have been to 40 countries, and when I travel, I collect musical instruments that are indigenous to those countries. This one happens to come from New Mexico. It's an Indian flute, and for the musicians that are in the audience, you will know this little piece that I put on here allows you to play the pentatonic scale. Penta means 5.
Right.
Okay, these play 8-tone scale. This plays a 5-tone. It's like playing the black keys on a piano. That's a pentatonic scale, black keys. What's cool about that is that if you play things in the pentatonic scale, whatever you play sounds good. Wouldn't be true there. It sounds like I know what I'm doing.
Oh.
So as I improvise, you'll think, wow, that's a neat tune. I have no idea what that tune is. The
I love this.
religious leaders of the Indians is called a shaman.
Yeah.
And if you go to New Mexico, Colorado, and you look at the mountains, you'll see a picture of an Indian side view playing a flute, this flute. This flute. And when they played the flute, if you had a request of the shaman, for instance, you wanted to get pregnant, or you wanted it to rain, or whatever it might be, you would go set with the shaman. You'd probably bring him a chicken or something, and you would set and he would play the flute, and hopefully your prayers would be answered.
Well, music man, what have we here?
Well, some of your people will know that, especially if they know at all Russia. It's called a balalaika. And it plays kind of like a mandolin, except what's interesting about it is it has 3 strings rather than the 4, and they're tuned to E, E, and A. So it's the same pitch for two of the strings. Now we've heard them when we were in Russia several times, and Russians are very, very good at this. Beautiful. I'm not at all. Let me show you a great Russian tune. That's the extent of my Russian music.
Yeah,
Called
I can play that on the piano.
There you go. It's very easy. It's called a balalaika. It was really cool. We went there a couple of times to sister city called Rybsovsk. And we went as teachers. The first time was a teacher delegation, and we lived in teachers' homes. And the second time we went, we also lived in a teacher's home. It wasn't just a teacher's delegation, but we were assigned to a teacher. And when I got there, I wanted to buy a balalaika because I knew that it was a Russian instrument, very important to Russia. They, by the way, have a whole family of these. Like violins, you have the violin, the viola, the cello, and the bass.
Right.
They have the same thing. They look like this. Each one gets bigger, but they're built
It's
exactly
a little
alike.
tough to bring the big one home
The
in your
big one,
suitcase.
well, yeah, this was big enough. I carried this one on my back.
He kept threatening to play it in the plane as he carried it. Everybody said, boo!
Well, they heard me play it. They knew. But when we got there, I said to the husband of the teacher, he didn't speak any English, but through interpretation, that I had a desire to buy a balalaika. In Russia in '92, there weren't music stores. There weren't shopping centers. You had to buy milk in a milk store, or you had to buy bread in a bread store. Beer was sold from a tank truck at the corner. So you buy these different things
Take
wherever.
your own container.
So where would I buy a balalaika, I said. And he said, I'll check it out. So when we were to leave and we were all crying because we knew we'd never see each other again and we had made very, very good friends, he came up and I thought he'd forgotten, but he didn't. And he gave me this. He had bought it. And a shirt, an artist shirt with sequins all over it that the Russians would wear. So it was a great gift by.
So then you're going to let me know when you learn this, and you'll wear your sequin shirt.
I actually have a learning book there, which I haven't taken the time to use, but.
He's too busy, doesn't have time.
Well, you're too busy doing what, Dick?
You know, I do a bunch of stuff.
You just named me 5 things that you do.
5. Well,
I know he's in the Historic Society, and I challenge all of you to check it out. And in your town, or our town, any town.
We're very healthy there. We have the Schmidt House. We have some 25 or 30 players that entertain around. We've done the retirement home over at Spring Meadows a couple of weeks ago.
We do school classrooms.
And that's how you happen to be costumed today, because these are the personas that you play as that.
Yeah. And you know, I've kind of reached out with that. The retirement home people are in my age bracket or above. And when I talk about the history of this town as the professor, and then I got out of costume and I talked to them about their history. And anything that would go, my presentation would go 20 minutes, half an hour, I'm there another hour because they have stories to tell that are just delightful. They talk about the Second World War they lived through, or the Depression. So they have great stories.
Now you know, Dick, why I do this show. I love great stories.
They're great
and
stories.
It's only by bringing people like you to share not only, their own history, but grandmas and great grandmas, and it's just wonderful. We've had the Peckhams go back to 1850. Peggy, forgive me, was it 50 or 49? Right in there.
Right.
And she's told her stories. She writes for the Courier, so don't miss that little history piece.
Very good.
But what about some of these other instruments? I mean, this one.
Isn't that pretty?
The wood, and this again has
Another kind of flute.
Yeah, it's a flute. very difficult to play. We were in Ecuador, and then we went to Machu Picchu in Peru. And we were in Quito one evening, and we went to a dinner concert, and the artist was playing one of these, just exactly like this one. And he was so good. He had a three-piece group, and he was playing beautiful. If you haven't heard the music of the Andes Mountains, pick it up.
Oh, it's awesome.
It is just really very, very pretty stuff. And after the concert, I went up to him and I said, I want to buy your flute. And it was meant to be a joke, but the idea was if I had his flute, I could play like him, which probably wasn't true. But he said, I make flutes, I'll make you one. So we were there for several days, and he made this flute for me, and I purchased this. It plays like a recorder, except not. If you know recorder, a recorder is similar to this as far as mouthpiece. You just blow in the end of it. This is kind of a hybrid on that. You blow in the end of it, but you blow into it as you do these.
Like
the same kind of embouchure that you play, that kind of thing. And really tough for a flute player who plays these to configure your mouth for this one, because it really is different. I'm pretty good today, yeah. Anyway, very, very pretty instrument, and it has a memory of that area.
You know, the panpipes are something
Right.
first time I heard it, I thought, now this is music.
Oh, and they're very good.
Pan
They
flutes
play.
are
They play a
beautiful.
lot of guitars, pan flute, this flute, and the music. They sing, of course, and the music is just gorgeous. I love it.
And what takes you all around the world?
Well, the first time I went, it was courtesy of the United States Army.
So
And,
your boy.
That was interesting. The day of our wedding, I got a letter in the mail.
From
And it-
uncle? From your uncle?
Yeah, from my uncle. Said, "You're in the Army
With the
now."
stars in his hat.
So it kind of took the edge off the wedding.
I'll bet.
But anyway, I spent a couple of years in Germany playing the piccolo in an Army band. So it was a great time to go. And I think I was bitten by that idea, because I was there a year and a half or so. And the idea of going to a foreign country and being a part of a different culture was addictive. And since that, we've taken lots of kinds of trips. I'd say the cruises are my low-level thing. I don't like cruises, but I've been on a couple. We have done 5 missionary trips. We went to Nepal. We were looking at the hospitals there. We went to Ecuador, and we were building a wing on a church for the Indians there. We went to Honduras. We were building a community that had been destroyed by hurricane. We went to Kenya. That one was special. It was teachers' college, 300 teachers learning to be school teachers. And
Is that where this came from?
no, it didn't. It would look like that, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
It wasn't. It was kind of in that area a little bit. Some of your people will know what this is before I tell them.
Well, longhorn, huh?
Yeah, it comes from an animal, but it is called a shofar. Shofar. A shofar is an instrument that the Jews play in the synagogue. So the musician who would play this, when he plays it, now some of them are longer. I think the artists play ones that are about this long, a little shorter one. I had to carry this home.
Another trip.
Another
Not
trip.
Well, the Bible describes the ram's horn.
Right. You didn't travel this way. One
No,
instrument
it was
or
a
the
different
other.
trip.
Many
One at a time. One at a time. But the shofar, again, if you're speaking of the Old Testament, you remember the walls of Jericho? Well, this was the trumpet. So when they walked around the wall and they played the drum, if you remember, some of you people will not remember, most will, walking around the wall, these people were going to invade this city. And they're about to invade it, and God said, no, I want you to walk around the wall 7 days, 7 times a day, and play the trumpet. Now let me tell you, if I was in the Army and I was told to do that, I'd say, oh, come on now, let's be serious.
Somebody's going to throw a rock at
Well,
me and I'm
yeah,
going to get
this
hurt.
is a dumb idea. It's going to invade this place with trumpet walking around the wall. But they did it, and the Bible talks about the wall falling down. We were in Jericho, and we saw the place where the walls were. Of course, they're long since hauled off or somewhere else at this point.
Well, as I understand it, they just built a new town on top of the old town.
You know, they didn't in this
did
case, which was interesting. Jericho now is down on a lower level. Where the old city is, it's a higher area there. Trip to Israel was beyond belief. It was wonderful to see all of those historic places that I had read about in the Bible.
I agree with you, and I was just lucky enough to do it. Unfortunately, while we were there, the U.S. Army base in Lebanon was blown up.
Oh, yeah.
And so we're ham radio operators, and I had a license to operate there, and we became suspect.
Uh-oh.
And
Yeah.
you could hear the bombs bursting, or gunshots and things, and so I still get goosebumps even thinking about it,
I hear you.
because it was like, here you are in this peaceful, wonderful place with bombs bursting in the air.
Great history, yeah. Now we just this last year went on a pilgrimage, which was Greece, Turkey, Egypt, and Jordan.
Oh my!
And these countries, the Greece part of that was to go the places where Paul went to preach.
Well, I surely thank you for coming and
Are we
bringing all.
through?
We're
I have another story.
I bet you do.
Many
Well, we'll
stories.
just have to invite you back again.
I'd love
But
to.
until then, let's just appreciate all this wonderful music. And folks, if you like music, they still have. We had a band concert, a band stand. Maybe your town still has band concerts. I'm Bernie Martin Beck saying thanks so much for tuning in. And thank you, Dick, or whatever your name is, Professor
Kurth.
Kirk. Bye for now.